Welcome to What We Made Possible, the podcast where we explore the power of healing and driving change for advocates, leaders, and change makers. The conversations here draw the connection between creating new possibilities in the world, possibilities of care, of belonging, of thriving for our communities, with stories of personal healing and loving relationship building. I'm your host, Patty Dayleg, leadership coach for social change. I spent a decade in nonprofits, government, and DEI, securing 6- and 7-figure opportunities for communities of color. And I've experienced firsthand the transformative power of compassion, healing, and belonging in making a bigger impact. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to What We Made Possible. Today, we have a really special guest, Noilyn Mendoza, who I have known for over a decade now. We've worked together in so many different capacities, and I'm so excited for you to meet her. Welcome, Noy.
Thanks, Patty. Thanks for having me.
Noilyn Mendoza is a certified life and leadership coach, a savvy business and organizational strategist, and a professional pranic healer. But her real title is a soul purpose coach. Noylin specializes in supporting change makers who've lost their way and want to reignite their dreams. She's your bold dream navigator and champion, helping you to shift from fear to action so you can start living the life you're truly meant to live. Her journey has taken her through 18 years in the public sector, advocating for immigrant healthcare access in New York City. That's how we met. Noylin knows firsthand how easy it is to put others' needs first and forget about your own dreams. She now guides individuals at a pivotal moment in their lives to imagine again and rediscover their purpose. Since 2017, Noy has been a catalyst for hundreds of individuals, helping them to tap into their creative potential, find newfound clarity, and discover new possibilities. And she has a podcast herself called Unlock Your Inner Creator, where she dives into enlightening conversations with brave pathfinders who dare to explore fresh ways of living, being, and doing. And when she's not empowering people to step into their greatness, Noy engages in epic dance-offs with her kids. She tends to her burgeoning green thumb and continues her quest to fill her passport with stamps. And she and her family live in sunny Southern California. So Noy, I like to start off, this conversation, this podcast is all about possibilities. And I always want to kind of ground in the idea that what we're in right now was once a possibility, right? So question for you is, what is in your current reality, your day-to-day life now, or how you are in the world now, that a younger version of you didn't know was possible?
This is such an interesting question. And as you were reading my bio, I was like, wow, I've actually changed a lot. So in full transparency, I'm also going through the stages of a complete rebrand, as they like to say it, right? In entrepreneur spaces. And I also just think that in this point in my life too, it's in some ways happening in real time. I'm a big proponent of what happens in one space is also a mirror of things that are happening in another space. And your question around possibilities, I think in this particular moment that we are in is kind of a tough question, right? There's so much that's going on right now where it's hard to look at possibilities. I was just going through the news this morning and talking with my husband. And for all intents and purposes, if you look at it, it seems pretty hopeless. So how do you root back into possibilities? And I'm thinking about when you asked me that question, that a younger version of myself didn't think was possible, right? Like you're saying, the fact that we're sitting here, who would have thought when we first met that you would have a podcast, I would have a podcast, that we would be talking about just things that professionally, I would have never thought that we would be talking about. And I think a younger version of myself wouldn't think that being able to create was even possible. And I say that because I think so many of us go down a path that we were either told, right, from society or from our families or from our communities, like this is the path that you should be going on if you're looking at wanting to be quote unquote successful, right? And I think for me, it probably has been about a decade of kind of unlearning that. You do have the possibility to reinvent yourself, to create, to even allow yourself to dream. And I think part of it, like I think part of the possibility is to remember where that comes from. And I've been really thinking about like where does this idea of possibility come from? I actually think that it is ingrained. You and I both share a common ancestry, right? Our people have been colonized, not once, but 3 times. And so I think about our ancestors that even in spite of all of that, they had to tap into this idea of possibility of something better than what they were seeing in front of them. And so I think that's what I'm rooting into. You and I joke around that the last few years that you have known me, I'm going deeper, right? Like I'm 2 years from my 50th birthday. So I think, clearly midlife, clearly owning it. Okay. And there's just a lot of things that are happening so quickly. I think one of the ahas that I was having actually just in this past year is like when you talk about possibility, as when I was 30, endless possibility. I could still have the ability to shift and to change. When you're a little older, that you have a lot of realities that come for to your mind and you think about like, do I have the ability to really shift and change? But I am reminded that I have to root in to the strength of our people, right? They had to dream. And if it's not for themselves, which I'm realizing, if it's not for myself, it's for a future generation. Right? I have to be able to see the possibility for something beyond me because I have kids now too. So I have to be able to root into the possibility of something, not just for myself, but for the people that come after me. What am I contributing? What am I dreaming about? What am I building to see what's possible?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think what you're pointing to is that there's almost this responsibility to hold on to
Mm,
possibility and
yeah.
this duty towards the future,
Mm,
duty, like we are beholden to like the generations that come after us,
yeah.
just like our ancestors were to us. What would you say, because you mentioned it's been about 10 years of unlearning,
Yeah.
and you've talked publicly about kind of some of the turning points in your own journey, and
Mhm.
it's been centered around healing. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's about 10 years. So my son is 9. He just turned 9 earlier this year. So I always think about that because I credit my eldest for being a really key turning point. When they say, like, what are those milestone or monumentous moments that really shifted you? When I had my son, I had to take a good hard look about how I was living, really showing up, right? I was in a very meaningful job that helped lots and lots of people. But what I was realizing at that time that there was something that felt so empty and that I was literally going through the motions. By going through the motions, you develop a certain type of, I don't know if expertise is the right word, but because you master it, right? When you do something repetitively, like you get really good at it. So I'm able to do this thing, right? Which was my career previous to me and running my own coaching and consulting practice. When I had my son, what it allowed me to actually do was to slow down and take a step back. And for those that are parents, you know this, right? Like sometimes you have these ideas of how you're going to be as a parent, and it's honestly thrown out the window, And it was a very, very humbling experience, right? Because leading up to that, like I said, I followed a certain path. You go to school, you do this thing, then you're gonna have like a kind of a predictable trajectory, right? When I had my son and leading up to my son being born, all of these ideas that I had from point A to point B did not happen. I thought, okay, I'm gonna get married at this age. 5 years later, I'm gonna have my first kid. That did not happen. It was not easy for me to actually conceive. So like that was the first like, okay, well, maybe sometimes the path is not so linear. And then when I had my son, my first few months was super hard actually. Like I didn't realize it at that time, but I was going through immense postpartum anxiety. But I think it actually surfaced a lot of things, because you're so at that stage where I feel like it's so carnal in some sense, like you're so raw and you actually allow yourself to be in that space to like actually face yourself. And so I did not have the tools at that time to actually understand what was happening. But I felt like it was like the first of many awakenings. And I really just, I look at my son now, like he officially, Patty, it's crazy. His shoe size is bigger than mine. So I'm like, oh my God, he's getting bigger. He's getting so much bigger. And,
Oh my
but,
gosh.
when I look at him, it's like, it's the physical manifestation of my change and my transformation. And so I think part of it was just like facing, you're not living an aligned life. So what are you going to do? You could either continue on this path or you can shift. And that's really scary for a lot of people. I know it was scary for me because I had a career in public health for almost 2 decades, right? But it was no longer helping me, it was no longer satisfying. And there's, I think, a certain level of like, who are you to like question that? Because, my examples were my parents, right? When the going got tough, they still stayed with their jobs. This idea of being able to pivot and pursue your dreams is so foreign because they were about survival, right? So it's a little bit, I don't want to say guilt, but it was just like, how dare you think about that? And then there's also this thing like, you actually invested a lot of time, energy, and money to getting this degree, right? And now you want to shit. But on the other end, there was this strong desire that said, you cannot continue like this. And what I realize is when that little nugget is telling you that something is off, it's going to just intensify if you do not face it. And sometimes what happens is that it just starts as a little thought. And if you don't answer it, it actually manifests as something physical. So that year, I probably I felt like my body completely broke down. So I was almost forced to take a break. Like I was so exhausted. I think that was the year that I probably was sick the most I had ever been. And I had to really take a good hard look. I was like, I cannot continue like this because I'm gonna get sicker, like physically sicker if I don't stop and really reassess how I'm showing up. Like it was absolutely burnout, but I felt like it was burnout beyond the physical. It was like emotional, mental burnout, spiritual burnout. And when you get like so low, you have to really contend with yourself. Like, am I going to continue like this or not? Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of get to the point where your burnout makes the decision for you. Like your body just makes the decision for you.
Yep. Exactly.
So, how did you get from, well, even before we go there,
Yeah.
there was a moment, and I'm forgetting where in the timeline this is, if it's before your son or after.
Hmm.
I remember we were sitting in a policy meeting and it was supposed to be a celebration. It was the day
It's after he was
after,
born. Yeah.
it was after he was born, the
Mm-hmm.
day after the 2016 election. And we
Mm-hmm.
were supposed to be gathering to celebrate this bill passing that we had been fighting for years. We were like flying in, national policy experts to speak at our rallies and all
Yes.
of that. The bill passes, and yet this big
Mm-hmm.
bomb just kind of dropped on us and our
Mm-hmm.
communities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of our conversations afterwards, right, where we noticed there were some people who doubled down and said, I'm staying in my work. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And then there's some people who made a very different decision,
Mm-hmm.
including you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny, 2016 is such a significant year because that's when my eldest was born. And that is when that meeting happened. And that is also when we had a turn of the administration, which happens to be the same administration that we have now. And yeah, you're so right. Because I remember reconnecting with another colleague a few years later, and she actually talked about that moment. And I was just like, wow. I mean, it was significant for all of us. Like that particular meeting was significant for a lot of people. And you're right. That meeting gave her resolve. Like she had even more conviction. I was on the other end. I remember going to that meeting and I kept thinking, well, first off, let me back up. This is why I thought this thought. So, as you said, we were waiting to celebrate. We had been working on this to push this policy for, I want to say maybe at that point, 4 or 5 years, right? This is one of those things where you've been working on it for so long and then you couldn't believe that it actually happened. And then none of us knew what was going to be coming for us. And I remember the night before, I couldn't sleep because I was like watching the TV and I was watching like the election results. And I was like, what is going on? But I remember at one point I was like, no, I'm so exhausted because when you have a newborn, my child I think was only maybe 5 or 6 months at that point, maybe 6 months. You're up at odd hours because you have to feed them, right? They have a lot of needs when they're so small like that. And I remember I told myself, I was like, no, 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 no. You have to go to sleep. And I remember falling asleep. And when Balthasar woke up, both my kids. I'm so grateful. We're actually really good sleepers, right? Like I never had that issue. But I remember I woke up because he had this, when he cried, it was like a different tone. It was like some kind of scream that he had was very different. And he woke up like in the middle of the night, and I was like, what happened to him, right? And we're waking up, and I was like, oh my gosh, what time is it? And it was somewhere in the middle of the night. And I don't know what possessed me. After I looked at my phone, I was seeing like all of these alerts coming up. What happened during the election, the result of the election, I was like, am I awake? Like it was almost like a surreal moment. And I was like, oh gosh, I had scheduled that meeting the day after the election. That actually wasn't really smart. But I think in our mind, we thought, wow, this is going to be a celebratory meeting on many fronts. Like we were actually going to watch like the acceptance speech and all of this stuff. Like we had planned it in the agenda. And I remember like I had this feeling in my gut that was just so like sunk in. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. And I have to now face our collaborative. And I don't know what I'm walking into. I really don't know what I'm walking into. And I remember when I got to the meeting, I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to hold space for this, how to allow them to process it. And then they're going to be looking to our organization as the next direction. And I remember very distinctly, we had a lot of people come at that meeting, but one colleague in particular walked into the door and everybody was just kind of holding it. Like, to be honest, they were just like, this sucked, but they're feeling something else inside. And I remember just seeing her walk through the door, and thank God for people who can feel. As she walked through the door, she looked right at me, came to me and hugged me. And I was like, oh no, what's going on? And she let it go. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot hold this space for people. And it wasn't because I wasn't going to be empathetic. I've always been known in my friend circles for like, people need advice, they come to me. But the immediate thought in my mind was, I am not okay. And it would be unfair for me to continue because I don't have the capacity to hold that kind of space that people required. And so it was like a real like leadership moment for me. It's like, if you do not have the bandwidth to be in that role that people ask you to be in, the best thing for you to do is actually step back. And that's when I realized. I was like, no, I am dealing with postpartum anxiety. I am a new mom. I'm extremely exhausted. But even before that, I was already questioning whether or not I was going to continue in public policy. I was already having those thoughts of like, I actually feel like I need to shift because something has to change in my life. This doesn't feel fulfilling. And I'm doing a disservice to the colleagues and to the communities that depend on us if I'm not showing up in the ways that I need to show up. So that actually was a really seminal moment for me where I just had to be like, you know what? This is probably the kindest thing that I can do, not just for myself, but for everybody else. I actually need to step back. And so that's when I actually decided, like, I'm going to need to figure out how to slowly transition out. Before, like you said, before I was even more sick and then I couldn't, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for remembering that so vividly. I am now having the vision of our colleague walking in
Yeah.
and just
Yes.
and just the realization just to know, and that it is a moment of leadership because you're thinking about like, okay, what am I able to give? And at that moment it's like what I'm able to give is not what this group of
Yeah.
people needs.
Yeah.
And so as you were taking a step back, you mentioned it's been kind of a 10-year unlearning
Yeah.
journey. What has been supportive for you? What have
Mm,
been like, how do you know, right? Like, how do you know that you're in a different place now than you were before?
mm. Lots of things, right? I'm laughing a lot more. Like I'm a little bit, like when you feel a level of lightness in yourself, that's when you know. I remember looking back at that time, everything felt heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally everything. Shoulders were always tight, my legs felt heavy, and it has nothing to do with living in New York City. You walk it all over the place, right? Like everything felt like a struggle. Like you were kind of like slugging through everything, right? And it's not to say that I don't have those days in the last decade. You absolutely do. But you know that you've come up to the other side when you can find the space to be joyful, to laugh, to be silly, right? To create. I think that's one of the things that I think also when I look back at that time, that there was always this part of me that felt very itchy to be in a space of creation. Like, I come from a family of artists. I married an artist, right? And I felt like for many, many years, like that creative and artistic part of me was actually buried down to be more analytical. And I knew that I was getting to a place of healing and better when I had the desire to want to create, right? I think the other piece that helped me get through too was honestly to reconnect with nature. There is just so much healing that can happen when we get out of the office chair and be among the forest, be by the ocean. I think that it's so simple. In pranic healing, in our basic class, one of the things that they teach you in order to rejuvenate your energy is to literally take your shoes off and lie down, right? So you earth. You find an old tree, you ask permission, may I sit here? And it's just to like be in that space. And what actually also helped me is to also reconnect with parts of my identity, to find like universal truths and laws with that, right? So to understand that as a Filipina, before colonization, we were animist. We had reverence for nature because nature could teach us so many things. And part of understanding your relationship with nature is to understand that you are interconnected with all things. And so for me also was to be part of communities that actually center care, that center healing. That was also important, as opposed to being part of communities that were centering success in a different way, right? Like promotions and climbing up a ladder, or communities that were part of, and here's the reality, right? We were in public policy. You were always fighting against something. instead of creating and moving towards something. You were always against something. So I had to take myself out of that and step back and be part of communities of care, of people that were also in not necessarily like similar journeys, but this desire to want to live life more holistically and in a different way where we are caring for each other. I think the other thing that got me through too was finding a spiritual community that was willing to kind of unpack some questions that I had too, and to also be able to understand the world in a different way and your part in it, and to really think about how you want to live this life. So I had a friend from college who was actually in my wedding, and there was like a point in time where we hadn't seen each other for like, I want to say maybe at least 15 years. Because my husband and I moved to New York and then we like reconnected with her, right? And, when we're all in our late 40s, early 50s. And I remember reconnecting with her, I want to say last year. And when you haven't seen somebody in a really long time who's our age, we look really different. I could see on like everybody's faces that we hadn't seen in a long time. You can see like the years of experience is what I'll say has showed up. And we were just talking and she was sharing with me just, everything that like she's been through, losses, changes, and a lot of things that, that I've been dealing with. She was like, are we coming to peace with where we are in our midlife right now? And for her, she has, and she's been through this process. And there's one thing that she said to me that it has really, really stuck. She's like, you know what? I'm not here chasing the next title or making a certain amount of money anymore. She's like, I've come to peace with that. She's like, for me, the goal now is how do I live a dignified life? So I think that's part of it. It's also the healing piece is to ask ourselves these questions. What do you believe to be is a dignified life, right? Like what is a dignified life to you? And that could look like so many things. And for me right now, it's also the same. I'm honestly not about chasing goals. And it's interesting for me to say that because we're in entrepreneurial spaces. It's about scaling up. It's about expansion. And it's about growing. But if anything, particularly this year, what it has taught me is there's so much wisdom in simplifying and slowing down and letting go.
Yeah. As you're talking about like reconnecting with nature, and now you're talking about kind of these rhythms, right? That are so natural as well, right? There's moments of growth and then there's wintering, right? There's moments
Yep.
of calm and like kind of coming into ourselves. I was reminded of this meme it said something like, I don't want to be a girl boss. I just want to be a girl moss.
I love it.
So, the other thing too is that we're both coaches and
Mm,
we're consultants, and we have some projects together where we're supporting folks who are doing similar work to what we used to do.
yeah.
And so we're in some of the spaces that we used to be in, but in a very different
Mm,
role and
yeah.
playing a very different part. What does that look like for you? Because you're centering healing, you're not centering growth at all costs. And in fact, you're not seeking growth, right? You're seeking this kind of dignity. So, what does that look like for you now? What does that look like for the folks that you work with now? How do you think about that?
Mhm. Yeah. It is interesting to be on the other side and to bear witness to that. So I think I come with a lot of empathy because you know what? A lot of folks come to this work, right? You don't do social justice work for a paycheck, right? It's usually a very personal reason. So either you were directly impacted or a loved one is. So I come with a lot of empathy and I come with a lot of compassion because for some people, this is the first time that they're allowing themselves to be seen and to talk about these things that are coming up for them, right? And so allowing them to first name it, because for a lot of times it's hard to name. And I think the other piece is also allowing them to see the possibility of something different. And I think part of seeing the possibility of something different, I think a common theme that I've seen across so many leaders that I've worked with is that you are not stuck in your organizations, right? Or you are not stuck in that organizational culture, okay? You are not stuck by that project because a funder wants you to do a certain thing. You always have the power to decide. You are in control, but sometimes we don't feel like we are. And the way that we can transmute that power can look like so many different things. Maybe they make a decision to do something differently that would allow them to reset, right? And it could be something so small. It could be like big overtures of like grand organizational policy change if they're an executive director, right? But you always have the ability to decide what you will focus on and what you are able to contribute, what your role is going to be. And just allowing people to ease into that. The other piece that's really big for me too, across all leaders, I think it regardless of organization or their background, we do not know how to rest. We do not understand that rest is not just about you taking a nap, taking a vacation, even. There actually has to be other ways for you to identify what is it that is feeling drained. Because sometimes you're feeling emotionally drained. Sometimes you're feeling creatively drained, spiritually drained. So we need to actually look at that. And some of them are, it's not just at work, in their personal life, they're also carrying this duty of care. And many people feel so alone in that role. And so I think it's to just allow them to think about how it is that I want to be able to sustain myself. Because you can't tell someone, oh, just leave and go to another job, right? Because for many of them, this is their heart work, this is their life work. And to be able to just hold that space and then think about, well, if this is what you want to do for the long haul, how can that look like? And sometimes it's about what is your role right now? And that role can shift. And this is what you're able to do. You don't have to carry the weight of the world, the weight of your organization. You don't have to be and do all the things, but you are still helping in some way. And that way is also needed, right? Like we're part of a larger ecosystem. So lean into that ecosystem. You are just one part, you are an integral part, and we need you to be okay.
What do you imagine your role to be? How are you kind of
Hmm.
conceptualizing your role now versus when we were in that like kind of direct response
Yeah,
and
yeah.
organizing and building? Like we were
Hmm.
doing all of that, right?
You know what? I still feel like I have the same role because back then, I oversaw a coalition. I still think I'm a weaver. I still think I'm that dot connector, and I still think I'm a bridge builder. I would say that I have taken that and I have taken different parts of it. It might look a little bit differently. I think the other role that I've also taken on, the new role, is to actually be in that healer role and to accept it. You're actually here to hold space for people and their pain. Not just that, but you're actually here to facilitate with their lead, because I'm not here to do that, with their lead, what that healing can look like and to honor it, right? Like, I'm not literally here to heal you because you already have the ability to do that. I'm just facilitating this process for you or connecting you with resources or helping you to understand that there's some skills that can be built around that.
It's so interesting you say that because you're looking back at that 2016 moment. The thing that you were thinking was, I don't have capacity to hold this space.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're like, no, I'm coming into the fact that I am holding, and that your healing and your ability to come back to and access that spiritual rest, that spiritual community, being with nature, everything that you named has kind of brought back the capacity and shifted the capacity in that kind of like healing direction.
Yeah, and I think, the other aha for me too is to realize that you actually don't have to have all the answers. You can still hold space for people. I think that's been a big shift for me. Like, you don't need to know everything. You just need to be able to meet people where they are.
I really love that because it's such an uncertain moment right now.
Yeah.
Our like we just don't know what's going to happen later today, right? In government, in our communities, what other needs and policies and cuts are going to come down. What right now is keeping you grounded and okay in that uncertainty, right? You mentioned like that's going to happen, that uncertainty is going to happen. How do you stay kind of
Mm,
rooted?
that is a good question. I feel like that's something that I ask myself every day, to be honest, right? You know what's interesting is in the midst of all of this, so I want to recognize that this past year I lost three elders in my family. We're coming up to about a year. So the first transition was my uncle who passed away in November. It was very sudden. Actually, all three of them were passings that were not anticipated, is all I could say. At least when they happened. There were some that were dealing with, chronic conditions, but we didn't think it was going to happen, within the last year. So it's interesting to say, like, how do you stay grounded in those moments where the world is on fire and my reality is also in my personal life. There's been so much loss and grief. And to be quite frank, like existential questions. What is my place in this world? What are we doing? And so for me to stay grounded is to understand that every end has a beginning. What we're dealing with, it's hard, it's terrible, but somehow we're going to come on the other side. And we always do. And I've had to remind myself, like, in moments where it was so dark and it was so hard, I have to also remember that somehow, even if you didn't think about that moment, because you're sometimes just trying to get through like the next day, the next hour, the next minute, the way that time goes, time's always moving forward. So I have to remind myself of that. And then the other thing that has helped me is to really understand what is it that I can control. Because I can get caught up with everything that's not going right in my life and in the world. And you can be consumed by that, right? And part of it is just, how do I regulate my nervous system? What I can control right now is the way that I'm breathing. What I can control right now is what I'm thinking. And I always joke around. I was like, thank God I have coaching training, because I learned the power of a reframe, not to bypass anything, but for me, the power of a reframe is really like, can you see the totality of what is in front of you? Right? It's not just this thing that's bad. There's, what are all the other things that are there, right? So I've had to actually use my own tools that I learned on myself. I think the other grounding piece is, back to nature, right? The beautiful thing about nature, as you mentioned, everything is in a cycle, right? That's the power of nature. So, I'm in Southern California. I feel like it's two seasons. It's either raining or it's hot. So it's hard to visually see it. But when I lived on the East Coast, what I loved about it is that in the fall, what is the fall known for? Harvesting. It's also known for shedding, right? And so that's what you have to remember. Winter. Animals hibernate. We are the only species that probably doesn't hibernate. We probably should, right? But winter is about like going inward, reflection, really thinking about conserving your energy. Spring is when you plant seeds, when things are starting to bloom. And then summer, you have the energy, maybe more energy to like do the things, right? And so understanding that kind of perspective has actually helped me a lot.
Ooh, I feel like we just got a whole masterclass on how to ground yourself in this moment. The other thing I just want to presence is that you mentioned kind of reconnecting to your culture and our shared culture. You're learning the language. You are traveling to the Philippines. Your kids came with you to the Philippines for the first time. Yeah, so I'm just curious, like, how is
Mm,
that kind of influencing how you're showing up these days?
okay. Yes. So let me give context. I was born in the Philippines. My first language was Tagalog. And then I came to the States when I was 4. So my parents have always been bilingual. And when we came in the early 80s, right, it was like America is a melting pot. And so assimilation, it wasn't even like, not assimilate, yeah, assimilate as fast as possible, right? We are one culture, everybody has to speak English. And so I've always understood Tagalog, right? Spoke very little bit because my parents actually didn't emphasize. They wanted us to succeed, like so many Filipino immigrants at that time. There was always a part of me that thought, there's something missing. I want to be more fluent beyond just like introducing myself and doing all of these things, right? So for me, it's not learning, it's relearning the language and embracing that part of me. Because it actually took me a really long time. It wasn't until my 30s. I would always identify like I'm a 1.5 generation. I might as well be two because I came here when I was 4, right? I didn't call myself an immigrant for a very long time until I started doing immigrant rights work. I said, what is it that about saying that I'm an immigrant that I'm so ashamed of? Because I am an immigrant, right? I wasn't born here. So I had first, that was like one of the things, like I had to really accept that identity and not look at it as like something shameful. And then I would say it's helped me in so many ways to really hone in on this reconnection in a deeper way because, I've grown up in Filipino communities. My university at that time had the biggest Filipino student club. Okay. It wasn't that I was unaware of being Filipino American, it was all around me. I grew up in Southern California, right? So part of it was to really deepen into what does that mean to be Filipino? And I felt like for me that it was important. And when I had kids, it became even more of an imperative. I was in this class. So you see this book that's behind me, right? This book is a Philippine plant medicine book. And this is one of my teachers. So Angela Angel. And it was one of the first classes that I took because I was like desiring when I was pregnant with my first, I was like, for some reason, have this, I thought in my mind, I was like, I need to know the postpartum protocols and rituals that are Filipino because I feel like that's what I need. And I was like searching and I couldn't find anything. I was finding all these things on like Chinese herbal medicine and all of these other cultures, but we didn't have anything. And then I somehow came across Angela. She was coming to New York. She's originally from the Bay Area. And I was in a class. So I've taken her class 3 times because I just adore her so much. It's the same things that she teaches, but I just keep taking the class, right? The first time I was in New York. The second time is like shortly after I moved back to Southern California. And I was in Long Beach. And she was teaching this class, and we would go around the room like, why are you here? Why are you taking this class? Right. And there was this one woman named Kay, and she was a birth doula who I happened to actually hire later on for my second child's birth. But there was something that Kay said that I will never forget. She said, I am here because I realized that when my mom passes, I will have lost my connection to my culture, like my direct connection, because I will not have someone to ask questions about my ancestry, my lineage, my family. And I really thought about that. I said, oh my God, she's right. because our parents in my family are the only ones right now who are completely fluent in our languages and dialects. When they are gone, who's going to teach us? Who's going to teach our kids? And it's even more like evident now. So for me, it's been really important that my kids also understand our ancestry. So part of it is, how can you learn ancestry if you're not at the physical place of it? So we've made it a point to actually go to the Philippines quite a bit and to go where their grandparents are from. So it's been such an incredible, amazing experience. You know, my mom is from Aklan and Boracay is in Aklan. And so what's been so interesting is to be able to tell my son, like, this is where grandma grew up. Look how beautiful it is. It's lush. There is amazing water that's like crystal clear. It's so blue. And look at all these rice paddies. And this last trip was even more incredible for me because sometimes I feel like, you know, when our parents come here, they kind of forget and they just want to be American. And I had to do my own kind of research and I didn't realize how amazing Aklan is until, you know, we went back this last time because my aunt who raised me passed away. And my cousin who lives here, she goes back and forth. She was like, why don't we go around? And I started researching stuff online. Like, how come I didn't know this? Aklan is the origin of piña. Like, my people are the ones who wove piña. When you think of a barong, you think of piña. Okay? So we went to a weaving museum. And I just was like, this is incredible because I would learn about all of these other weaves, right? From all these other places. But it was on my mom's side, like, this is what Aklan is known for, right? We're known for beautiful beaches like Boracay, but we're also known for piña. And it was also another place that is also known for Ati-Atihan and the indigenous communities that are there. So for me to be able to show my kids, like, in real time, like, look at this, right? Like, this is the greatness that we come from. And to be able to show my kids also where my dad's from. Like, I was tripping out on one of the times because I was like, oh my gosh, like, I know we're going to my grandma's house and I haven't been here for such a long time and I'm taking my kids. I was like, we passed a street that had my maiden name. Okay. Like, literally my maiden name. Like, that was the name of the street. Abisamis. Right? Like, my ancestry has been rooted here for I don't even know how long, hundreds of years. So it is very different when you are somebody from the diaspora and you don't feel connected to this land, to go to a place and to see yourself and to know these things, that it's rooted in like generations of your family. It's a very different feeling, right? It's spiritual in a lot of sense because you feel this connection that is almost not tangible and it's very, very hard to explain, especially when you were taken in somebody else's land. And I think the last thing I'll say that too is rooting into understanding and connecting with my culture has also allowed me to also understand what's happening here to indigenous communities, that we actually have to build better relationships with them. Because in some sense, yes, we are here, but we're a product of imperialism. We were forced to come here because of what was happening in our home countries. But what duty do we have to the indigenous communities here? And how can we be better stewards to this land? Because we don't treat this land very well and the people in it, the original people that were in it. So it's also allowed me to understand, like, on one end to want to connect, but I also have a duty of the place that I live in. That's one way that I can connect to this land.
That's beautiful. And it's so interesting that now, since back when we were kind of in policy work, that you are also identifying as a weaver, or like a weaver of
Yeah.
a different way. You
It's in my blood. It's in my blood.
It's literally in your blood to bring things together and
Yeah.
and the creativity, right? Piña is pineapple. It's like a fiber. It's this clothing that comes from pineapple, and pineapple is not native to the Philippines,
Mhm.
but your ancestors were the ones who
Helping
were
me
able to
transmute that.
flip that on its head.
Yeah.
Hmm. That's a beautiful thing. Noe, is there anything that needs to be said that you haven't been able to express yet?
I'm thinking about this time is just so fragile. There's so many things that are happening that are just very hard to witness, right? I think one thing I'll say is like, let's not forget our humanity. I think part of it too is also recognizing as a coach and as a consultant. I think, some people, they call it trauma, they call it, other things. But I think what we're witnessing actually is a tremendous amount of grief. So for me as a coach and as a consultant, and I would also urge other people who share that role professionally, is to really think about how do you tend to somebody's grief
Mm.
and how can you allow them to be in it? Because I think for so many communities, it looks like a luxury to sit in that space because there's so much more that needs to be done. Or I can't allow myself to grieve because somebody else needs me. I was told that by a colleague, actually. He was telling me, and I was just dumbfounded. He's like, this is the seventh funeral I'm going to. And I was just like, nobody should be witnessing that. But we see that that's common in so many communities. And I said, are you taking some time off? Because the last funeral was, I think, his nephew. And I said, are you taking some time off for this? He's like, why? I can't. And I was just like blown away. It's like, where have we come to this point where we can't allow people to process that and to allow them that space? And I think people are grieving. And I think it's been like this for a really, really long time. And I don't have the answers to it, but I think about what is my role as a coach, as a consultant, to bear witness to that. And I think the other thing is, and I'm sure that you've used this, Patty, like there's that feelings wheel that we always look at, right? And it's usually like, what is your initial feeling? Like, I'm mad or I'm angry or something like that. But like, what's behind that? And then what's the feeling behind that? And what's the feeling behind that? Which will actually hopefully allow us to get to like, what was that core thing, you know? And I think about that, like, there's something beyond that grief
Mm.
that we're not able to name. Like, we don't know what it is yet, but how do we get there? I think the other thing is it's really hard. I understand that for a lot of people, but please don't lose sight that you have the ability to reimagine. And I think this is what this time is really forcing us to do. Because it could be easy right now to be very hopeless. Let's tap into that ability. Like, you, all the oppressors, what they cannot take away from us is our ability to imagine something better for ourselves. And I think the third thing that I'll end with is we got to take care of each other. Like, you cannot do life on your own. We really have to find communities of care. So whether that's being part of mutual aid organizations, being part of groups that just allow you to like dream, being part of groups that are fun groups, are silly groups. We don't have to always like overanalyze everything, right? Like, find people that can also remind you that you should be joyful, that you can laugh. Like, we need all of those different kinds of communities, and how you in turn, how can you be that for other people? I feel like for me right now, that's what I'm pouring into so that I can get to the other side, that we can get to the other side together.
Yeah, that laughter, that joy, it's a sustainability strategy,
Mhm. Absolutely.
especially through this grief. And for some people, underneath the grief is love. For some people, underneath the grief is that hope or that imagination or that dream.
Yeah.
It's going to be different. And I think you're right. There is such a need to be able to just bear witness and to let it be there, give it space, give it a voice, give it like the ability to like just move through our bodies.
Or just let it land, right? Like we don't
Mhm.
need to come up with a resolution or a solution. You could just let it land. I've had to tell that to some of my clients, and sometimes I feel like when I tell it to them, I'm telling it for myself, right?
Yeah.
Just allow, you know what? There is no need for us to come up with a resolution or an action step. Not everything has to be that way.
Which is so different than what we learned in coaching school, right? Which is there's always an action step, you're always moving forward. But I think coming back to what you said earlier about like the cyclical nature of things, right? It doesn't have to always be that way. And how can we just honor what's here in this moment?
The here and now.
The here and now. Well, thank you so much, Noi. I wanted also just to share that when I was thinking of creating this podcast, I was thinking of people like you who have been in my life for so long and are such mentors and like guides in my life. None of my work now, none of my life now would be possible if we didn't meet that day. What is it? 13, 14 years ago, whatever it was. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Patty. And I'm just glad that we've been in each other's lives and all the iterations of ourselves in each other's lives, and that we can continue really to grow with each other. That's what I see it as. Like, how are we growing with each other? How are we building with each other? And those are the people that I want to keep in my life and call in.
Yeah, our fellow weavers. All right. Well, thank you so much, Noi. Folks who are listening, you're going to get all of the show notes, all the ways that you can connect with Noi and how you can enjoy more of her wisdom. And I will see you in the next episode. Thank you. Thank you for listening to What We Made Possible. I really hope this episode resonated. As a coach, I always end with action steps. And so I invite you to do something, which is to pause and ask yourself, what resonated? What am I taking away? And what's possible for me and my community now? If you liked this conversation, please leave a review and a rating. It helps so much. Thanks again.